You think we still need someone like you in this company? That's adorable." Those words still ring in my ears, the condescending tone, the dismissive laugh that followed. 20 years of my life dedicated to building something from nothing. And in 5 minutes, I was tossed aside like yesterday's trash. But what Victor didn't know was that I'd already made my move. The company he thought he controlled was already mine. I'm Rebecca Chen, 47 years old, and this is how I turned the tables on the man who thought he could erase 2 decades of my life with a signature. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember my first day at Meridian Software. It was 2003, and I walked into a cramped office space on the outskirts of Portland. Just 15 employees huddled around mismatched desks, working on outdated equipment, but with a shared vision that felt electric. Gregory Sullivan, the founder, was this brilliant, kind-hearted developer who believed software could revolutionize healthcare logistics. Back then, we weren't even called Meridian yet, just Sullivan Systems, working out of what used to be a former dance studio with pipes that leaked whenever it rained. I was hired as a junior software developer with a background in healthcare administration, a perfect blend for what Greg was trying to build. Our flagship product was a simple inventory management system for small medical clinics. Nothing groundbreaking, but it solved a real problem. Those early days were chaotic but magical. We'd work until midnight, order Chinese takeout, and debate code architecture while sitting cross-legged on the floor. Greg would always say, "Rebecca, you bridge the gap between what doctors need and what engineers build." Within 3 years, I was heading the product development team. By year 5, I had grown my department to 25 people. We had expanded from basic inventory management to comprehensive healthcare logistics systems used in hospitals across 3 states. My team's innovations had become the backbone of the company. We weren't just writing code. We were transforming how medical supplies reached patients when they needed them most. Greg never micromanaged me. He'd say, "You understand this better than anyone, Rebecca. Make the calls you need to make." I had complete autonomy to hire, fire, allocate resources, and determine our technical direction. When competitors tried poaching me with offers of higher salaries, I declined without hesitation. Meridian wasn't just a job, it was my legacy. By 2015, Meridian Software was thriving. We'd moved into a sleek office building in downtown Portland with a view of the Willamette River. Our staff had grown to over 300 people. We'd expanded internationally, with clients across North America and starting to break into European markets. The small medical clinics we once served were now just one segment of our diverse client base that included major hospital networks, pharmaceutical distributors, and medical equipment manufacturers. That's when Victor Richardson entered the picture. Victor was brought in as the new CFO when our previous one retired. Tall, always dressed in perfectly tailored suits, with salt and pepper hair and a Harvard MBA he mentioned in every other sentence. On the surface, he seemed impressive. Articulate, experienced, with a resume featuring several major tech companies. Greg was approaching retirement age and thought Victor could help prepare the company for its next phase of growth. At first, Victor was charm personified. He'd regularly stop by my office to touch base about product development timelines and how they aligned with financial projections. He complimented my work ethic, saying things like, "Rebecca, we need more leaders with your dedication." He'd invite me to coffee to discuss strategic synergies between our departments. I wasn't naive. I knew corporate speak when I heard it. But I respected the need for financial discipline as we scaled. What I didn't see was how Victor was positioning himself with the board. Greg had taken a step back from daily operations, focusing more on the company's long-term vision while battling some health issues. Meanwhile, Victor was presenting himself as the steady hand who could professionalize what he subtly characterized as our somewhat informal management approach. In late 2017, Greg announced his full retirement. The board, heavily influenced by Victor's polished presentations and promises of exponential growth, named him as the new CEO. At the company-wide announcement, Victor put his arm around my shoulders and said, "With Rebecca's product brilliance and my financial acumen, Meridian will dominate the market." I still believed we shared the same vision for the company. The changes started subtly. First came the consultants, a team of efficiency experts who shadowed departments for weeks, asking questions about our processes and taking endless notes. Next came the new reporting structures that added 3 layers of approval for decisions I used to make independently. Then the standardization initiatives that replaced our flexible, iterative development approach with rigid methodologies, better suited for manufacturing than software innovation. My concerns were dismissed as resistance to necessary evolution. When I brought data showing our development velocity declining under the new processes, Victor smiled condescendingly and said, "Rebecca, the startup mindset served us well in the early days, but we're playing in the big leagues now." The real blow came during budget planning for 2023. My department, always the innovation engine of the company, had our funding cut by 30%. Meanwhile, a new strategic acquisitions division headed by Victor's former colleague from his Harvard days received a massive budget allocation. When I questioned this at the executive meeting, Victor smoothly explained it as balancing our investment portfolio for optimal stakeholder returns. By early 2024, the company I had helped build was becoming unrecognizable. Our once collaborative culture had been replaced by political maneuvering and fear. Longtime team members were leaving in waves, replaced by Victor's network of business, school connections with impressive resumes, but little understanding of healthcare logistics. Our product releases were increasingly diluted, focusing more on flashy features for sales presentations than substantive improvements for end users. I kept fighting for what I believed was right for the company, for our clients, and for the healthcare providers who relied on our systems. Each battle became more exhausting than the last. Victor would listen with a practiced, patient expression, before overruling me with corporate platitudes about market realities and shareholder expectations. Then came that fateful Monday in March. I was called into Victor's office first thing in the morning. His executive assistant's face was a mask of professional sympathy as she ushered me in. Victor sat behind his massive glass desk, flanked by Gabriel from HR and someone I didn't recognize, a young man in his early 30s looking uncomfortable in what appeared to be a new suit. "Rebecca, thank you for coming," Victor began with practiced solemnity. "This isn't easy, but we need to discuss your role at Meridian." I remained silent, watching him perform his rehearsed speech. The technology landscape is evolving rapidly, and we need leadership that aligns with our future direction. After careful consideration, we've decided to restructure the product development division. We're bringing in fresh perspectives, more aligned with emerging technologies and market approaches. He gestured to the young man. "This is Jason Winters. He'll be taking over as Chief Product Officer, overseeing a more agile, modernized department structure." I looked at Jason, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. A quick LinkedIn search later would reveal he had 4 years of experience at a social media app company and was the nephew of one of our board members. "And where does that leave me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "We value your historical knowledge of the company," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're creating a new role for you as senior advisor to the innovation team. You'll report to Melissa in corporate strategy." Melissa had been at the company for 8 months. She was 29. "So I'm being demoted," I stated flatly. Victor's smile tightened. "We're leveraging your experience in a capacity better suited to our evolving needs. After 20 years of building this company from nothing, you're removing me from leadership and having me report to someone who wasn't even in college when I designed the architecture that still powers our core systems?" Victor's facade cracked slightly. "Rebecca, tech is a young person's game. The pace of change The pace of change, I interrupted, hasn't altered the fundamental logistics problems we solve, which I understand better than anyone in this building. That's when he leaned back, a smirk spreading across his face. You think we still need someone like you in this company? That's adorable. Then he laughed. Actually laughed, as if my 2 decades of contribution were some cute delusion. Your severance package is generous, Gabrielle interjected, sliding a folder across the desk. 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and we won't contest unemployment. I didn't touch the folder. And if I don't accept this new position, then the severance package is your alternative, Victor said, his voice hardening. We're prepared to move forward either way, effective immediately. I stood up slowly, my mind racing beyond the shock and anger. I'll need time to consider my options. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Of course, Victor said, his smugness returning. Take the rest of the week. Jason will begin transitioning into the role immediately, so clean out any personal items from your office today. Building security has been notified that your access changes to visitor status starting tomorrow. As I walked out, I heard him say to Jason, "Let's talk about your vision for modernizing what has become a rather outdated approach." The door hadn't even closed behind me. I drove home in a daze, 20 years of memories flooding through my mind. The product launches, the late nights solving critical bugs, the hospital administrators who'd sent thank you notes when our systems helped them during crisis situations. 20 years of my life, dismissed with a condescending laugh. But here's where my story takes an unexpected turn. 6 months earlier, I had received a call from Marcus Way, an old colleague who'd moved into venture capital. Rebecca, have you heard the rumors? Apex Holdings is looking to acquire Meridian. They think Victor has positioned it perfectly for consolidation with their healthcare division. I hadn't heard the rumors, but it made perfect sense. Victor's strategic realignment wasn't about strengthening Meridian, it was about packaging it for sale. The cost-cutting, the replacement of experienced leaders with cheaper alternatives, the focus on short-term metrics over sustainable growth. Classic pre-acquisition maneuvers. Marcus continued. The word is, they're planning to strip it for the client list and patent portfolio, then absorb or eliminate most of the staff. Classic slash and burn. The thought of Meridian, Greg's vision, my life's work, the systems that thousands of healthcare providers relied on, being dismantled for parts made me physically ill. When is this happening? I asked. Board vote is in about 4 months. Victor's been quietly courting key shareholders. It's not public yet, but the deal is practically done. That night, I couldn't sleep. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Marcus back. I want to make a counteroffer. What are you talking about, Rebecca? I want to buy Meridian before Apex does. There was a long pause on the line. With what capital? It was a fair question. I had savings, but nowhere near enough to acquire a company of Meridian's size. What I did have, however, was knowledge. Intimate. Knowledge of the company's true value, its hidden potential, and most importantly, its vulnerabilities. Over the next several weeks, I worked with Marcus to assemble a consortium of investors, former colleagues who believed in Meridian's mission, healthcare technology specialists who understood the value of our systems, and venture capitalists looking for stable returns rather than explosive exits. I leveraged every relationship I'd built over 2 decades in the industry. I opened up my personal finances, taking massive personal risk by putting up my house and retirement funds as part of my contribution. What we lacked in raw capital, we made up for in strategy. We identified that Meridian's ownership was more fragmented than it appeared. Greg still held 15%, though he'd become disengaged after retirement. Several early employees collectively held another 10%. Some of the original angel investors who'd been ignored by Victor held smaller percentages that added up. Most importantly, we structured an offer that emphasized continuing Meridian's mission rather than stripping it for parts. We approached these shareholders directly, carefully staying under the radar. Greg was the first to commit when he heard about Victor's plans to sell to Apex. "This isn't what I built the company for," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "I'm in." One by one, other shareholders joined our side. We established a holding company, Phoenix Healthcare Technologies, to make the acquisition. As CEO of Phoenix, I would effectively regain control of Meridian once the deal was complete. The negotiations were complex and exhausting. Several times, it seemed the whole plan would fall apart. We had to increase our offer twice, stretching our financial commitments to the absolute limit. There were sleepless nights when I questioned everything, wondering if I was throwing away my financial security on a vendetta. But then I would remember the hospitals that relied on our systems, the team members who had poured their creativity into building something meaningful, and Victor's dismissive laugh. I kept going. 3 days before, I was called into Victor's office to be demoted. The final paperwork was signed. Phoenix Healthcare Technologies, my company, now owned 58% of Meridian Software. The acquisition was structured to remain confidential for 10 business days, while legal teams completed the transition process. Only a handful of people knew: our investor group, our lawyers, and 2 members of Meridian's board who had sided with us. Victor wasn't among them. So when he laughed at me in his office, when he dismissed 20 years of my contributions, when he had security escort me to clear out my personal items, he had no idea he was actually answering to me. I spent that week at home, not in despair, as Victor likely assumed, but in careful planning with our legal team. We scheduled the board meeting for Monday morning, exactly 1 week after my humiliating dismissal. The official reason: urgent discussion of acquisition matters. Victor likely assumed it was about finalizing the Apex deal. He had no idea what was coming. I arrived at the office early that Monday, dressed in my most confident outfit, a tailored, charcoal suit I'd bought specifically for this moment. The receptionist did a double take when I walked in. "Ms. Chen?" I thought, should I call security? "That won't be necessary, Angela. I'm expected at the board meeting." Her confusion was evident, but she handed me a visitor badge. I took the elevator to the top floor, where the boardroom overlooked the city. Through the glass walls, I could see several board members already seated. Victor stood at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically about something. I paused outside the door, took a deep breath, and walked in. The conversation stopped abruptly. Victor stared at me, first in confusion, then in anger. "Rebecca, this is a closed board meeting. How did you get in here?" I smiled pleasantly. "I was invited. As majority shareholder, my presence is required for any major decisions." The room went completely silent. Victor's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and the beginnings of fear. "What are you talking about?" he finally managed. I took my time, setting my briefcase on the table and removing a folder. Phoenix Healthcare Technologies now owns 58% of Meridian Software's shares. As CEO of Phoenix, I called this meeting. I slid copies of the acquisition documents across the table. "You'll find everything is in order." One of the board members, an older woman who had always been fair-minded, picked up the document first. "This appears legitimate," she said after scanning the contents. "Completed last week." Victor snatched a copy, his face reddening as he flipped through the pages. "This is impossible. This is some kind of fraud." "I assure you it's not," said Marcus, who had just entered the room. "The transaction has been verified by 3 independent law firms. Phoenix Healthcare Technologies is now the parent company of Meridian Software." Victor looked around the room, searching for allies, finding none. Even those who had supported him looked uncertain, unwilling to challenge legal documentation. The first order of business, I continued calmly, is a restructuring of executive leadership. For the next hour, I outlined the changes that would take effect immediately. Victor was removed as CEO. Several of his appointed executives, those who had participated in dismantling what we'd built, were also terminated. I announced our withdrawal from the Apex acquisition talks and presented our new strategic direction, refocusing on healthcare innovation rather than financial engineering. Throughout it all, Victor sat stunned, occasionally attempting to object, but finding his voice carrying no weight. When the formal business was concluded, most of the board members left, some pausing to congratulate me quietly on the way out. Soon, only Victor and I remained in the room. "You planned this," he said, his voice a mix of anger and bewilderment. "All along." "Not all along," I replied honestly. "Only after I discovered you were planning to sell the company for parts. The company that Greg built. The company that I dedicated 20 years of my life to. The company that thousands of healthcare providers rely on. It was a sound business decision," he insisted. "The shareholders would have received premium value. And the employees, the clients, the patients whose care depends on our systems, what would they have received?" He had no answer for that. I stood up, gathering my materials. "Your severance package is on the table. It's exactly the same one you offered me last week. I thought that was fitting." As I walked to the door, Victor called after me, his voice no longer carrying that smooth, confident tone. "You can't run this company without me. My connections, my financial expertise." I turned back one last time. "You think we still need someone like you in this company?" I paused, letting the familiar words hang in the air. "That's adorable." I didn't laugh, though. Some moments don't need that. Punctuation. The weeks that followed were intense but exhilarating. We had to move quickly to stabilize the company after the leadership changes. I reinstated several key team members who had been pushed out under Victor's regime. We restored the product, development budget, and abandoned the meaningless metrics that had been strangling innovation. Jason Winters, the young man who had been appointed to replace me, was reassigned to a product manager role better suited to his actual experience level. During our conversation, he admitted, "I knew I wasn't qualified for that position. My uncle, on the board, pushed for it. I was uncomfortable with the whole thing." I appreciated his honesty. Everyone deserves a chance to grow into their capabilities, not to be thrust into a role they're not ready for. That doesn't help you or the company. The most emotional moment came when I called Greg to tell him the company was secure. He invited me to his home, and we sat on his deck overlooking the Columbia River, drinking coffee like we used to in those early days. "I should have been more careful," he said, watching an osprey circle over the water. "I let Victor charm me just like he charmed the board." "We all did," I assured him. "He's very good at what he does." Greg turned to me, his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. "But you were better. You saw what he couldn't, that a company is more than numbers on a balance sheet. It's people. It's purpose." He reached over and squeezed my hand. I couldn't have chosen a better person to carry on what we started. Today, 6 months after that boardroom confrontation, Meridian is thriving again. We've retained 98% of our clients, brought back key talent, and launched new features that actually solve real problems for healthcare providers. Our team is energized, working with purpose rather than fear. I still put in long hours, but they're different now. I'm not just building products. I'm shaping the kind of company I want Meridian to be for the next 20 years. One that values experience and innovation equally. One that measures success not just by profit margins, but by the impact our work has on healthcare delivery. Last week, I received an email from a hospital administrator in rural Oregon. "Your system helped us manage supplies during a major flooding event," she wrote. We didn't lose a single patient despite being cut off for 72 hours. Thank you for what? You do. I forwarded it to the entire company with a simple note. This is why we exist. As for Victor, I heard he landed at a private equity firm specializing in tech company acquisitions. Some people never change their approach, only their victims. But that's not my concern anymore. What I learned through this experience is something I wish I could tell everyone facing similar situations. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. Sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the perfect opportunity to show exactly what you're capable of. Have you ever been underestimated in your career? How did you respond? Share your experiences in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if this story resonated with you, make sure you're subscribed for more real-life inspiration coming your way. I never saw the storm coming. That was my first mistake. The initial signs were subtle, like the first few raindrops before a deluge. It began with the acquisition. Meridian had grown beyond what even Greg had envisioned, with our healthcare logistics software now implemented in over 600 hospitals nationwide. Our valuation had crossed the $200 million mark, making us an attractive target. Ironblood Capital, a private equity firm known for acquiring mid-sized tech companies, approached our board with an offer that made their eyes widen. $245 million. The deal included provisions for Greg to retire comfortably and for the executive team to remain in place during a transition period. At least, that's what we were told. Greg called me into his office the day after the preliminary agreement was signed. He looked tired, with deeper lines around his eyes than I'd noticed before. The office still had his trademark clutter, engineering books stacked haphazardly, the same faded Oregon State University mug he'd used for 20 years, and the whiteboard, covered in his distinctive handwriting. "Rebecca, I need to talk to you about the acquisition," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I've heard rumors. Is it really happening?" He nodded slowly. "The board voted yesterday. Ironblood's offer was too good to refuse." I leaned forward. "What does this mean for us? For the product roadmap we've spent the last year developing?" "On paper, nothing changes. You'll still lead product development. Our vision stays intact." He paused, rubbing his temple. "They've promised to keep our mission and team together." "But you don't believe them," I said, reading the doubt in his expression. Greg sighed. "I want to. Victor Richardson, their point person, seems to understand what we've built here. But Rebecca..." He looked me directly in the eyes. "Watch carefully. These private equity folks speak a different language, one where quarterly returns trump long-term vision." I nodded, appreciating his candor. "I'll be vigilant. You've been with me since nearly the beginning. This company's DNA has your fingerprints all over it. If anyone can preserve what matters, it's you." The acquisition was announced the following week. Champagne flowed in the main lobby as Victor Richardson stood beside Greg, both raising glasses to an exciting new chapter. Victor looked every inch the successful executive, tall with perfectly coiffed silver hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "To Meridian's incredible team," Victor announced, his voice carrying across the room. "Your innovation has built something truly special, and Ironblood Capital is committed to accelerating your vision, not changing it." Employees clapped, relieved by the assurance. I stood at the back, studying Victor's practiced smile and wondering what lay beneath it. The transition began smoothly. Victor shadowed Greg for the first month, learning about our operations, sitting in on executive meetings, asking thoughtful questions about our development process. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding what made Meridian successful. During one product strategy session, he even defended my team's long-term research initiative when our CFO questioned the ROI timeline. "Some innovations can't be quantified in a quarterly spreadsheet," Victor said. "Rebecca's team has consistently delivered breakthrough solutions. They've earned the trust to explore long-horizon projects. I remember feeling a surge of gratitude. Maybe Greg's concerns were unfounded. Maybe Victor truly understood our company's value extended beyond immediate profit margins. 2 months into the transition, Greg announced his official retirement. The farewell party was bittersweet, celebrating his legacy while acknowledging the end of an era. He pulled me aside as the evening wound down. "Keep your eyes open, Rebecca," he whispered, "and document everything." A week later, Victor moved into Greg's office. The first thing he did was remove the wall of photos showing Meridian's history, the cramped first office, the team celebration when we signed our first hospital chain, Greg cutting the ribbon at our current headquarters. In their place went framed certificates from Harvard Business School and the various companies where Victor had previously worked. I tried not to read too much into it. Change is inevitable with new leadership. What mattered was preserving our core mission and the innovations that made us industry leaders. The first real warning came 3 months after Greg's departure. Victor called an executive team meeting to introduce a new operational efficiency framework. He stood at the front of the conference room, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand, drawing flowcharts on the whiteboard. "Our analysis shows several redundancies in the current structure," he explained, circling departments on his diagram. "By streamlining decision-making and centralizing key functions, we can reduce overhead while increasing output." What followed was a complete reorganization. Previously autonomous departments would now report through a new layer of management, mostly people Victor brought in from his previous companies. The org chart he distributed showed my product development team split into 3 groups, each reporting to different executives. "Victor," I said, raising my hand, "the product teams work in tight coordination. Splitting them administratively will create communication barriers and slow development." He smiled that practiced smile. "Rebecca, I appreciate your concern, but modern management science shows that functional specialization improves efficiency. Each team will have clearer objectives rather than the somewhat organic approach that's been used historically." The way he said organic, like it was a polite substitute for chaotic, made my spine stiffen. "Our organic approach delivered the innovations that made this company worth acquiring," I pointed out. The room went silent. Several colleagues stared at the table, avoiding eye contact. "And we honor that legacy," Victor replied smoothly. "But Meridian is entering a new phase. Growth at this scale requires more structured processes." I wanted to argue further, but recognized the futility. Victor had clearly made his decision before walking into the room. This meeting wasn't about discussion, it was about announcement. The reorganization was implemented the following week. My unified product development department was disbanded. The UX design team now reported to marketing. Back-end engineering fell under technology infrastructure. My core product strategy team remained with me, but at half its previous size. When I asked about the reassignments, Victor assured me this would free me up for more strategic thinking. In reality, it removed my direct influence over key aspects of product creation. The next 6 months brought a cascade of changes, each apparently reasonable in isolation, catastrophic in aggregate. First came the new approval processes. Every feature now required sign-off from 6 different departments before development could begin. Decision cycles that once took days now stretched into months. Then the budget restructuring. Research. Funding slashed by 40%, while a new market acquisition team received millions for client poaching rather than product improvement. Long-standing clients were pushed to upgrade to more expensive service tiers with minimal additional value. Most distressingly, Victor brought in his protege, Nathan Reeves, fresh from an MBA program with 0 healthcare experience, to oversee product innovation strategy. At 32, Nathan carried himself with unearned confidence, dismissing insights from team members who had spent decades solving real healthcare logistics problems. The market is changing. became his mantra. Whenever challenged, we need to pivot towards scalable solutions aligned with emerging consumer expectations. When asked to define those expectations, his answers were a word salad of business jargon that revealed his fundamental lack of understanding about our industry's specific challenges. I tried working within the new system. I documented the deteriorating product quality and increasing client complaints. I created detailed analyses showing how our development velocity had plummeted under the new processes. I scheduled meetings with Victor to express my concerns, bringing data to support every point. He would listen with practiced patience, thank me for my passionate commitment, and promise to take my feedback under advisement. Nothing ever changed, except perhaps the growing sense that I was being sidelined. The situation came to a head during the planning session for our next major release. My team had proposed significant improvements to our inventory management system, changes based on extensive research with hospital logistics staff that would dramatically reduce waste during crisis situations. Nathan's team had proposed a dashboard redesign, cosmetic changes that looked impressive in screenshots but added no functional value. Victor chose Nathan's proposal, citing market positioning advantages. I couldn't contain my frustration. Victor, our clients don't buy software based on how pretty the interface is. They need solutions that solve actual problems in medical supply chains. Lives literally depend on these systems working efficiently. He regarded me coolly. Rebecca, I understand you're emotionally invested in your team's work, but this decision isn't about emotions. It's about strategic positioning in a competitive marketplace. It's about abandoning what made this company valuable in the first place, I countered. We built Meridian on understanding healthcare logistics better than anyone else. Now we're prioritizing style over substance. Nathan smirked from across the table. Sometimes the old guard struggles to adapt to evolving market realities. It's natural. I turned to him sharply. And sometimes inexperience masquerades as innovation. There's nothing evolved about ignoring the actual needs of the people who use our products. The room went silent. Victor's expression hardened. I think we need to discuss your role in the organization, Rebecca, he said quietly. Perhaps offline. The meeting ended shortly after, with Victor's decision unchanged. Nathan avoided eye contact as he gathered his materials, his earlier smugness replaced by discomfort at the confrontation. That evening, I received an email, scheduling a meeting with Victor and HR for 9 a.m. the following Monday. The subject line read simply, Position Restructuring Discussion. I knew what was coming. Over the weekend, I reflected on my 20 years at Meridian. I had joined when we were 15 people working in a converted dance studio. I had built the product team from scratch, designed systems now used in hundreds of hospitals nationwide, mentored dozens of developers who went on to leadership positions. This company was as much mine as anyone's. Yet I was about to be pushed aside because I wouldn't abandon the principles that made us successful in the first place. Monday morning arrived with steel gray skies and a persistent drizzle that matched my mood. I dressed carefully, a charcoal suit I reserved for the most important client presentations. If this was to be my last stand, I would make it with dignity. Victor's assistant avoided eye contact as she ushered me into his office. Beside his desk sat Diane from HR and Nathan, whose presence surprised me. This wasn't just about demoting me. They were already positioning my replacement. Rebecca, thank you for coming in, Victor began, as if I had a choice. After careful consideration of Meridian's evolving needs, we've decided to implement some structural changes to better align our leadership with current market dynamics. I remained silent, watching him navigate through his practiced speech. Your contributions to Meridian have been significant, he continued. But organizations must evolve, and sometimes that means reevaluating roles that were established in different circumstances. You're removing me from product development, I stated, cutting through the corporate euphemisms. Victor's mouth tightened momentarily before resuming its professional smile. We're creating a new position that better leverages your historical knowledge while allowing for fresh perspectives in product leadership. And what exactly is this new position? Senior Advisor for Legacy Systems, Diane interjected, sliding a folder across the desk. You'll consult on maintenance issues for our established products, while the innovation teams focus on new development. You'll report to Nathan, who's being promoted to Chief Product Officer. I looked at Nathan, who had the decency to appear slightly uncomfortable. You're demoting me to an advisory role, reporting to someone who joined the company 8 months ago and has never worked in healthcare before today. We're evolving the organization to meet market demands, Victor replied, his tone hardening. Nathan brings fresh perspectives unencumbered by outdated methodologies. Outdated methodologies built this company from nothing to a $245 million acquisition, I reminded him. Victor leaned back, studying me with cold calculation. Rebecca, the tech industry moves quickly. What worked in the past? Our systems help distribute medical supplies during crises, I interrupted. Last year, during the Pacific Northwest floods, 3 hospitals maintained critical operations using our logistics systems. The fundamentals of that challenge haven't changed because some business school published a new management theory. Victor's professional veneer cracked. You think we still need someone like you in this company? That's adorable. Then he laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. The package is generous, Diane hurried to add, perhaps sensing the tension. 6-month salary as severance if you choose not to accept the new position, plus extended benefits. I didn't touch the folder. When would this transition take effect? Immediately, Victor replied. Nathan will address the product teams this afternoon. You can take the rest of the week to consider the offer while clearing out your personal items. Your system access will be limited to email only starting tomorrow. 20 years reduced to clearing out my desk in an afternoon. 2 decades of building something meaningful, dismissed with a condescending laugh. I stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with Victor. I'll need time to review the offer. Of course, he nodded, already turning his attention to his computer screen. HR will expect your decision by Friday. As I walked to the door, he called after me. Oh, and Rebecca, please don't disturb the teams with an emotional goodbye. It's better for everyone if transitions happen cleanly. I paused at the threshold. 20 years of relationships doesn't disappear with a memo, Victor. Unlike quarterly projections, some things can't be erased with an executive decision. I closed the door behind me and walked down the hallway, past the cubicles where developers were focused on their screens, past the conference rooms where I'd led countless brainstorming sessions, past the wall that still displayed our company, values, integrity, innovation, impact. The irony wasn't lost on me. I drove home in silence, rain streaming down the windshield, my mind racing in a dozen directions. Anger, betrayal, and loss competed for dominance. 20 years of my life had been dismissed in a 15-minute meeting, but beneath these emotions, something else was forming. A cold, clear determination. Victor thought he had won. He thought I would either accept the humiliating demotion or take the severance and disappear quietly. He assumed that because he controlled the company's organizational structure, he controlled the narrative. He was wrong. What Victor didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. The first time he overrode a critical product decision in favor of cosmetic changes, I recognized the trajectory. When he began isolating me from key discussions, I understood what was coming. So I had taken Greg's parting advice seriously. I watched carefully, and I documented everything. Every ill-advised decision, every departure from our core mission, every instance where client needs were sacrificed for short-term financial metrics. Most importantly, I documented the consequences, the increasing client complaints, the system failures that resulted from rushed development, the key talent that left due to frustration with the new regime. I had created a detailed record of Victor's systematic dismantling of what made Meridian valuable in the first place, but documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage. 3 months earlier, I had reached out to Michael Zhang, an old colleague who had moved into venture capital. Over coffee at a small cafe far from the office, I shared my concerns about Meridian's direction. Victor isn't building, he's extracting, I explained. He's cutting costs, reducing quality, and pushing existing clients into higher pricing tiers while delivering less value. Classic slash and burn before flipping the company. Michael nodded. It's a common playbook for private equity. Maximize short-term profits, dress up the metrics, then sell to a bigger fish before the consequences become apparent. The bigger fish being? Word is that Meditech Enterprises has been looking at Meridian. They want your hospital client list and patent portfolio. They'd likely dissolve most of the company after acquisition. The thought of Meridian being dismantled, our systems that hospitals relied on daily being absorbed into a conglomerate, that didn't understand their nuances, made me physically ill. There has to be an alternative, I said. Michael studied me for a moment. What exactly are you proposing, Rebecca? I took a deep breath. I want to save Meridian. Not just my job, the company's soul. The mission we've always had of creating technology that genuinely improves healthcare logistics. That's admirable, but sentiment doesn't sway private equity. Only money talks. Then let's speak their language, I replied. What if there was a competing offer? One that preserved what makes Meridian valuable rather than stripping it for parts? Michael leaned back, a spark of interest in his eyes. You're talking about a management buyout? I'm talking about whatever it takes to wrest control from people who don't understand or care about what we've built. The next day, Michael introduced me to Catherine Winters, a specialist in complex corporate structuring. Over the following weeks, we crafted a plan so audacious it seemed impossible, yet with each step, it came closer to reality. First, we approached Greg Sullivan. Though retired, he still held 12% of Meridian's shares and maintained relationships with several early investors who collectively controlled another 8%. When I explained Victor's systematic dismantling of our core values and the likely sale to Meditech, Greg's usual calm demeanor hardened. I didn't build this company for 20 years to see it gutted for parts, he said firmly. I'm in. What do you need from me? With Greg's support, we reached out to those early investors. Some were initially reluctant, but the detailed documentation I'd compiled painted a clear picture. Victor was sacrificing long-term value for short-term gain, and their investment would ultimately suffer. We also approached Carolyn Diaz, who had been our chief medical advisor before Victor eliminated her position. She had connections with several hospital groups that relied on our systems, groups that were increasingly concerned about the declining quality and support under the new regime. The hospitals are worried, Carolyn confirmed. Response times for critical issues have tripled. The last update introduced bugs that affected inventory accuracy during high-volume periods. Some administrators are already looking at alternatives. This information became another piece of our leverage. If major clients were considering leaving, Ironblood's investment was at risk. We could offer a stability they couldn't. By working around the clock for weeks, we assembled a coalition of investors, former executives, and strategic partners. We formed Phoenix Medical Systems as our acquisition vehicle, with me as CEO and Greg as chairman. The financing was complex and stretched me to my absolute limit. I mortgaged my house, liquidated my retirement accounts, and took on personal debt that would have seemed reckless under any other circumstances. Every member of our coalition contributed what they could, believing in our vision for Meridian's future. Finally, 2 weeks before my fateful meeting with Victor, we made our move. Phoenix Medical Systems submitted a formal offer to Ironblood Capital to acquire their controlling interest in Meridian Software. Our offer was marginally higher, and than what they'd originally paid, not the windfall they typically sought, but enough to prevent a loss on their investment. The timing was critical. Our sources indicated that Meditech's offer was still being finalized, giving us a narrow window to intervene. Ironblood's initial response was dismissive. Why sell for a modest return when Meditech might offer significantly more? But our coalition had one advantage. We could move quickly with financing already secured, while Meditech's due diligence process would take months. More importantly, we had information about the deteriorating product quality and client satisfaction under Victor's leadership. Issues that would inevitably surface during Meditech's detailed evaluation and potentially derail their offer or significantly reduce it. After a tense week of negotiations, Ironblood's board voted to accept our offer rather than risk the Meditech deal falling apart. The final paperwork was signed just 3 days before Victor called me into his office to demote me, which meant that when Victor laughed at me, when he dismissed 20 years of contributions with, "That's adorable," when he had security watch me clear out my personal items, he was unknowingly mocking his new boss. As I sat in my home office that evening after being demoted, surrounded by framed photos from Meridian's history and awards we'd won for innovation, I opened my laptop and sent a single email to our legal Team Fury, proceed with Phase 2, meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. The response came within minutes. All prepared. Conference room A confirmed. I closed my laptop and for the first time that day, smiled. Victor believed he had won a decisive victory. He had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. I slept surprisingly well that night, the kind of deep sleep that comes with absolute clarity of purpose. When my alarm sounded at 5:30 a.m., I was already awake, mentally rehearsing the day ahead. I chose my outfit deliberately, a steel blue suit I'd purchased in Milan during a healthcare technology conference last year, but had never worn to the office. Victor had only ever seen me in my usual professional attire, conservative and understated. Today would be different in every way. The morning light filtered through the Douglas firs surrounding my home as I made coffee, reviewing the documents. Our legal team had prepared. Everything was in order. The acquisition had been completed legally and properly. Ironblood Capital had signed all the necessary paperwork transferring their controlling interest to Phoenix Medical Systems. The board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. was entirely legitimate, called by Phoenix as the new majority shareholder. I arrived at Meridian's headquarters at 9:15, earlier than the executive team, but after most regular employees were already at their desks. The security guard at the front desk did a double take when I walked through the main entrance. "Ms. Chen," I thought. I was told your access had been changed." "Good morning, Jeff," I said warmly. "There's been a misunderstanding. Could you please issue me a standard visitor badge for now? I have a meeting upstairs at 10. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with contradicting whatever instructions he'd received. "I should probably call up to Mr. Richardson's office." "That won't be necessary," said a familiar voice behind me. I turned to see Michael Zhang, my venture capital contact and now a key investor in Phoenix Medical. "Ms. Chen is expected at the board meeting. I can escort her up." Jeff relaxed slightly, printing out visitor badges for both of us. As we walked toward the elevators, Michael spoke quietly. "Everyone's assembled in the small conference room down the hall from the main boardroom. Greg arrived 10 minutes ago. Catherine is reviewing the final transition announcements with legal. Are you ready for this?" I nodded, feeling a strange calm. More ready than I've ever been for anything. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and we walked past workstations where administrative staff glanced up with surprise at seeing me. Victor's assistant, Emma, was at her desk outside his office. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Rebecca, there's no meeting on Mr. Richardson's calendar with you today." "I'm not here to see Victor," I replied pleasantly. "I'm attending the board meeting in conference room A." "Board meeting? But there's no—" She stopped mid-sentence, glancing at her computer screen with confusion. "That's strange. It just appeared on the schedule." But Mr. Richardson hasn't mentioned. It was called rather suddenly, Michael explained smoothly. Corporate matters. I'm sure Mr. Richardson will be joining shortly. We continued down the hallway to the small conference room where our team waited. Greg stood when I entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. Despite his retirement, he looked energized today, dressed in a sharp navy suit rather than his usual casual attire. Rebecca? He embraced me briefly. The prodigal daughter returns to save the kingdom. A bit dramatic, don't you think? I laughed, though the sentiment wasn't entirely off base. Catherine Winters, our legal advisor, approached with a tablet. Everything's finalized. The board notification went out automatically at 9 Oz as scheduled. 4 of the 7 members have confirmed attendance, which gives us quorum. The other 3 will likely follow once Victor realizes what's happening. Speaking of which, Michael nodded toward the hallway. Word travels fast. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Emma hurrying into Victor's office. Moments later, Victor emerged, phone pressed to his ear, face tightening as he listened to whoever was on the other end. He looked toward our conference room, eyes narrowing when he spotted me. Showtime, Greg murmured. Victor ended his call and strode purposefully toward the main boardroom, not even glancing in our direction. Catherine checked her watch. The official meeting starts in 15 minutes. Let's move to conference room A. Our team gathered our materials and walked the short distance to the main boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see Victor standing at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically to 2 board members who had already arrived. When we entered, the conversation stopped abruptly. Rebecca? Victor stared in confusion, which quickly transformed to irritation. This is a closed board meeting. You're no longer authorized to attend these sessions. Actually, Catherine stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. Ms. Chen is here as CEO of Phoenix Medical Systems, which as of last week owns 63% of Meridian Software's shares. These documents confirm the transaction. Victor snatched the folder, flipping through pages with increasing agitation. This is impossible. There's been no acquisition approval. This is some kind of fraud. I assure you, everything is legitimate, Catherine replied calmly. Ironblood Capital accepted Phoenix's offer last week. The transaction has been properly registered with all relevant authorities. One of the board members, Eleanor Simmons, a sharp-minded venture capitalist who had always been fair in her assessments, reached for the documents. After reviewing them carefully, she looked up. These appear to be in order, she confirmed, her expression neutral but her eyes reflecting. Surprise. Ironblood sold their entire stake? They did, Greg confirmed, taking a seat at the table. And as chairman of Phoenix Medical Systems, I've called this meeting to address urgent matters regarding Meridian's leadership and strategic direction. Victor remained standing, his composure cracking. This is absurd. I wasn't informed of any sale. Ironblood can sell their shares to whoever they choose, Catherine interrupted. Just as they purchased controlling interest from the previous shareholders, the board was not required to approve the transaction. As the remaining board members arrived, each was handed a copy of the acquisition documents. The room filled with murmured conversations and expressions ranging from shock to grudging admiration as they realized what had happened. Victor remained at the head of the table, knuckles white as he gripped the back of his chair. His usual smooth confidence had evaporated, replaced by barely contained fury. Greg called the meeting to order at exactly 10 a.m. As the representative of Phoenix Medical Systems, now the majority shareholder of Meridian Software, I'll be chairing today's meeting. The first item on our agenda is a leadership restructuring, effective immediately. Victor interrupted. This is completely irregular. I haven't had time to review these documents or consult with Ironblood. We should adjourn until proper legal review. The documents have been reviewed by 3 independent law firms, Catherine stated, The transaction is complete and binding. Phoenix Medical Systems now controls Meridian Software, and as such, has the authority to make leadership changes. Eleanor Simmons spoke up. For clarity, who exactly is Phoenix Medical Systems? This entity appeared quite suddenly. I stepped forward, maintaining eye contact with Victor as I addressed the board. Phoenix was formed specifically to acquire Meridian Software and restore its original mission and values. Our investor group includes former executives, early Meridian investors, and strategic partners who believe in the company's potential when properly managed. And you're the CEO of this Phoenix? Victor's tone was dismissive. I am, I confirmed. After 20 years of building Meridian from the ground up, I found myself unwilling to watch it dismantled for short-term profit at the expense of clients who rely on our systems daily. This is about your personal grudge because of a simple reorganization? Victor scoffed, attempting to regain control of the narrative. This is about preventing the destruction of a company that provides critical infrastructure to hundreds of hospitals nationwide, I corrected him calmly. Your simple reorganization has resulted in declining product quality, staff departures, and growing client dissatisfaction. Not to mention your discussions with Meditech about selling the company for parts. Victor's face paled slightly. We clearly knew more than he'd anticipated. Greg continued with the agenda. The board will now vote on the following leadership changes. First, the removal of Victor Richardson as CEO of Meridian Software. The vote was quick and decisive. With Phoenix controlling 63% of shares, the outcome was never in doubt. 3 independent board members actually voted with us, having seen enough of Victor's management to be concerned about the company's direction. Second, Greg continued, the appointment of Rebecca Chen as CEO of Meridian Software. Again, the ITI vote passed easily. One by one, we proceeded through the restructuring plan, removing several executives Victor had brought in, reinstating key positions he'd eliminated, and approving a new strategic direction that refocused on product quality and client needs rather than extracting maximum short-term value. Throughout the process, Victor sat rigid in his chair, occasionally attempting to object, but finding his arguments falling on deaf ears. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the room knew it. When the formal business concluded, most board members filed out, several stopping to congratulate me quietly. Soon, only Victor and I remained in the boardroom. You planned this all along, he said, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. Not all along, I replied honestly. Only after it became clear you were methodically dismantling everything that made Meridian valuable. The company Greg founded, the systems that healthcare providers depend on daily, the culture that attracted and retained the best talent in the industry. It was business, he insisted, streamlining operations, improving efficiency. It was extraction, I interrupted. Cutting costs regardless of the consequences, pushing clients into higher price tiers while reducing service quality, preparing for a quick flip to Meditech who would have absorbed our client list and disbanded the company. He didn't deny it, which was confirmation enough. Your severance package is being prepared, I continued, standing to leave. It's exactly the same terms you offered me yesterday. 6-month salary, extended benefits. I thought that was appropriate. Victor stood as well, straightening his jacket in a futile attempt to regain dignity. You won't last 6 months. You don't have the skills to run a company at this scale. The market has changed. Healthcare technology isn't the same as when Greg built this place. I paused at the door and turned back. You're right about one thing, Victor. The market has changed. But what hasn't changed is that our clients need systems they can rely on during crises, developed by people who understand healthcare logistics at a fundamental level. That was always Meridian's strength, and it will be again. I left him standing, alone in the boardroom, staring out at the city below as his empire crumbled around him. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Our team had prepared meticulously for this transition, and everyone knew their role. Catherine worked with HR to process the leadership changes and prepare announcements. Michael coordinated with our financial team to ensure operational continuity. Greg made personal calls to key clients to reassure them about the company's direction. By early afternoon, I was ready to address the staff. We gathered everyone in the large central atrium, nearly 300 employees filling the space, murmuring with confusion and speculation about the morning's events. I stood on the central staircase, surveying the faces looking up at me. Some I'd known for over a decade. Others had joined under Victor's tenure and knew me only as a department head who'd been suddenly demoted. All looked uncertain about what these rapid changes meant for their future. For those who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Chen, I began. Until yesterday, I was Director of Product Development. Today, I've been appointed CEO of Meridian Software following a change in company ownership. The murmuring increased. I raised a hand for quiet. I know this is sudden and raises many questions. Let me address the most important one first. Meridian is not being sold. The acquisition that happened was specifically to prevent that outcome. Phoenix Medical Systems, the company that now owns controlling interest in Meridian, was formed by people who believe in what we've built here and want to preserve it, not dismantle it. Relief visibly spread through the crowd. Many had clearly heard rumors about the potential Meditech acquisition and what it would mean for their jobs. Over the coming days, you'll notice several changes as we realign our priorities. Some executive positions will change. Certain recent policies will be reversed. But the core of what we're doing, creating software that improves healthcare logistics, remains unchanged. I took a moment to make eye contact with as many people as possible before continuing. For 20 years, I've worked alongside many of you to build systems that hospitals and clinics rely on daily. Systems that ensure medical supplies reach patients when needed most. That mission matters now more than ever. It's why I fought to save this company, and it's what will guide us moving forward. I noticed Nathan, my recently appointed replacement, standing near the back, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Rather than avoid the awkwardness, I addressed it directly. Some of you were placed in difficult positions during the recent restructuring. You were given roles or tasks that set you up for conflict or failure. I want to be clear. I don't hold that against anyone. Each of us had to navigate a challenging situation the best we could. What matters now is how we move forward together. The tension in Nathan's posture eased slightly. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement. In the coming days, department heads will receive detailed information about our renewed direction. For now, I ask for your patience and continued dedication to the work that has always made Meridian special, creating technology that genuinely improves healthcare outcomes. As the crowd dispersed, many employees approached me with congratulations, questions, or simply to express relief. Several longtime team members who had been considering leaving under Victor's leadership immediately committed to staying. The energy throughout the building had transformed from resignation to cautious optimism. I spent the remainder of the day in back-to-back meetings, reassuring key clients, connecting with department heads, and beginning the process of unwinding Victor's most damaging policies. By evening, exhaustion began to set in, but it was a satisfying tiredness, like muscles aching after necessary work. As I prepared to leave for the day, I stopped by my old office, the one I'd been forced to clear out just yesterday. It had already been partially reorganized for Nathan, with my awards and photos replaced by generic corporate art. The sight gave me pause. Despite the day's victory, so much had changed in such a short time. Could we truly restore what had been lost? Feels strange, doesn't it? A voice said from the doorway. I turned to see Greg standing there, hands in his pockets. Very, I admitted. Yesterday, I was carrying my things out in boxes. Today, I'm deciding whether to take the CEO office or find a different space. Greg smiled. Take Victor's office. It has better windows, but change the furniture. That stark, minimalist stuff he brought in is uncomfortable as hell. I laughed, feeling some of the day's tension release. I can't believe we actually pulled this off. I can, Greg said simply. You built this place as much as I did, Rebecca. Maybe more in recent years. It was always meant to be yours eventually, just not through such a dramatic route. He glanced around the office thoughtfully. You know what the real challenge will be, don't you? I nodded. Rebuilding trust, with the staff, with clients, even with some investors. Victor did significant damage in a short time. Yes, but more than that, Greg said. The challenge will be remembering why we built Meridian in the first place. Not to win corporate battles or outmaneuver financial predators, satisfying as that might be. We built it to solve real problems for people who provide healthcare. I considered his words carefully. You're right. This victory means nothing if we don't refocus on that mission. Greg squeezed my shoulder. That's why I'm not worried. You never forgot what matters, even when it would have been easier to just take the severance and walk away. After he left, I remained in the office a few minutes longer, looking out at the Portland skyline as twilight descended. Tomorrow would bring countless challenges as we worked to repair what Victor had broken. But tonight, I allowed myself to appreciate how far we'd come. As I locked up to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Check your email. Just received interesting information from Ironblood Capital. I pulled up the message immediately. Attached was an internal memo from Ironblood's board explaining their decision to sell to Phoenix. The key paragraph stood out starkly. While the return on the Meridian investment is below our typical target, ongoing due diligence has revealed concerning trends in product quality and client retention under current management. These issues would inevitably surface during Meditech's extended evaluation process, potentially resulting in a significant reduction in their offer or complete withdrawal. The Phoenix offer, while modest, represents a clean exit without further risk exposure. I smiled, forwarding the email to Catherine and Greg with a simple note. Turns out doing the right thing for clients and products is also good business. Who knew? As I drove home through the rain-slicked streets, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in just 48 hours. From being unceremoniously demoted to becoming CEO of the company I had helped build. From clearing out my desk to planning the company's future. From victim to victor. But the most satisfying transformation was still to come, restoring Meridian to what it was meant to be all along. A company that created genuine value through innovation and understanding of healthcare needs. Not a financial instrument to be manipulated for quick profit, but a sustainable enterprise built on solving real problems. Victor had laughed when I suggested we still needed people who understood the core mission. That's adorable, he'd said, dismissively. What he failed to understand was that this understanding wasn't just some quaint sentiment, it was the foundation of Meridian's value. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Undoing the damage would take time. Rebuilding trust with employees and clients would require consistent effort. Realigning the company with its original purpose would mean challenging conversations and difficult decisions. But tonight, I allowed myself to savor the moment when everything changed. When Victor realized the company he thought he controlled had already slipped from his grasp. When the power dynamics shifted irreversibly. When 20 years of building, something meaningful proved stronger than short-term financial engineering. I pulled into my driveway, noticing how the house looked different somehow. Not physically changed, but viewed through new eyes. This morning I had left as a recently demoted employee facing an uncertain future. I returned as the CEO of a company reclaimed from those who failed to understand its value. As I unlocked my front door, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Nathan, my would-be replacement. I hesitated briefly before answering. Rebecca? He began, his voice uncertain. I wanted to apologize. I never felt right about how they positioned me to replace you. I knew I wasn't qualified, but you were placed in an impossible situation, I finished for him. I meant what I said earlier, Nathan. I don't hold it against you. What happens now? He asked. With my position, I mean. I had already given this some thought. That depends on what you want, Nathan. You have skills that could be valuable to Meridian in the right role. Not running product development, but perhaps managing specific projects that align with your experience. If you're interested, we can discuss possibilities tomorrow. The relief in his voice was palpable. I'd like that opportunity. Thank you. After ending the call, I finally allowed myself to fully relax. I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and stepped onto my back deck overlooking the forest behind my home. The evening air was cool and fragrant with pine after the day's rain. I raised my glass in a silent toast to Greg, who had built something worth fighting for, to our team, who had executed an impossible plan flawlessly, and to Victor, whose arrogance had blinded him to the possibility that the person he so casually dismissed might become his undoing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight was for savoring the sweet taste of justice served. The first month, as CEO, was a whirlwind of activity. Each morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise, watching the early light paint the Portland skyline in hues of gold and pink. These quiet moments provided essential clarity before diving into the day's challenges. I'd taken Greg's advice and moved into Victor's former office, but completely reimagined the space. Gone was the stark, sterile furniture that emphasized hierarchy over function. Instead, I'd brought in a large round table for collaborative meetings, comfortable seating areas for informal discussions, and displayed artwork created by the children of Meridian employees. Most importantly, I restored the wall of photos documenting the company's history that Victor had removed, a visual reminder of our journey and purpose. The initial transition announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. TechWire ran a bite-sized feature with the headline, "Unprecedented Reversal, Demoted Executive Acquires Company, Ousts CEO." Several business publications reached out for interviews, fascinated by the dramatic corporate tale. I declined most, focusing instead on stabilizing the company and rebuilding trust with our stakeholders. My first priority was addressing the damage done to our product quality. I immediately halted the cosmetic dashboard redesign Victor had prioritized and redirected resources to the critical inventory management improvements my team had originally proposed. The developers who had been demoralized under the previous regime were energized by the renewed focus on substantive work. "It feels like we're building something that matters again," said Teresa, a senior developer who had been considering leaving. "For months, I've been forced to work on flashy features no one actually needed while watching the core systems deteriorate." I also moved quickly to reverse Victor's most destructive policies. The cumbersome approval processes that had paralyzed decision-making were streamlined. Research funding was restored to departments working on healthcare innovations. The arbitrary cost-cutting measures that had compromised quality were ended. Most painfully, I had to address the staffing changes Victor had implemented. Several talented, experienced team members had been pushed out in favor of cheaper, less qualified replacements. Others had been placed in inappropriate roles based on political considerations rather than skills. Nathan, my would-be replacement, was one of the first people I spoke with. True to my word, I met with him the day after the takeover to discuss his future at Meridian. "I appreciate your candor yesterday," I began as he sat nervously across from me in my new office. "Few people would have called to apologize in your position." "It was the right thing to do," he replied, fidgeting with his watch. "I knew from the start I wasn't qualified to run product development. I'd never even worked in healthcare before Meridian. Why did you accept the position then?" I asked, genuinely curious. Nathan sighed. "Honestly, Career advancement. Victor convinced me it was a stepping stone, that I could learn on the job. He said the healthcare specifics weren't important, that modern management principles could be applied across any industry. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I realize now how misguided that was. His self-awareness impressed me. What's your background, Nathan? Your actual expertise? UX? Design for consumer applications. I led a small team at my previous company focused on user engagement metrics. We increased daily active users by 42% through interface improvements. I nodded thoughtfully. That's valuable experience, just not for running our entire product. Strategy. How would you feel about heading a UX enhancement initiative within our mobile applications team? The clinical staff who use our systems in high-pressure situations deserve interfaces optimized for their specific needs. The relief on his face was evident. That would actually align with my skills. I'd welcome the opportunity. This became my approach to handling Victor's misplaced personnel, finding the right fit for their actual talents, rather than the roles they'd been inappropriately assigned. Some transitions were straightforward. Others required difficult conversations. A few of Victor's executives, those who had actively participated in his most damaging decisions, were asked to leave with severance packages. By week 3, the organizational structure had been substantially recalibrated. Departments were realigned to optimize collaboration rather than control. Decision-making authority was pushed closer to the teams doing the actual work rather than concentrated in the executive suite. The most critical task, however, was rebuilding relationships with our clients. Victor's policies had strained many long-standing partnerships as service quality declined while prices increased. To address this, I personally called the administrators of our 20 largest hospital systems, many of whom I'd worked with for years. "Rebecca," said Dr. Marshall from Northwest Regional Healthcare during one such call, "I can't tell you how relieved we are about this change. We were days away from exploring alternative vendors. The system issues were becoming untenable, and whenever we raised concerns, we got corporate doublespeak instead of solutions." "I deeply apologize for that experience," I replied. "It runs counter to everything Meridian should stand for. I'd like to schedule time next week to review all your outstanding issues and develop a concrete resolution plan. In the meantime, we're implementing an emergency response team specifically for critical client needs." One by one, we began rebuilding trust. For clients who had suffered financial impacts due to system problems under Victor's leadership, we offered compensation in the form of extended service agreements or additional module access at no cost. For those who had been pushed into expensive contract upgrades with minimal added value, we restructured the terms to better align with their actual needs. These gestures came at a short-term financial cost, but the long-term value of preserved relationships far outweighed the immediate expense. By demonstrating that Meridian was recommitting to its founding principles, creating genuine value for healthcare providers rather than extracting maximum profit, we began to restore our reputation in the industry. Internally, the company culture was slowly healing. The fear and political maneuvering that had characterized Victor's tenure gave way to collaborative problem-solving. People who had stopped speaking up in meetings for fear of retaliation began contributing ideas again. The energy in the building noticeably shifted from resignation to cautious optimism. 4 weeks after the takeover, I called the first all-hands meeting since the initial announcement. The central atrium was packed once again, but the mood was markedly different from that first uncertain gathering. 1 month ago, I stood here and promised changes, I began. Today, I want to share what we've accomplished together and outline our path forward. I presented the concrete progress. 12 critical system issues resolved, 5 major client relationships saved from the brink of termination, research initiatives restarted, and a simplified organizational structure that removed unnecessary barriers. But numbers alone don't tell the full story, I continued. The real measure of our progress is in the renewed spirit I see throughout Meridian. People staying late not because they're afraid of losing their jobs, but because they're excited about solving problems that matter. Teams collaborating across departments without jumping through bureaucratic hoops. Engineers empowered to make decisions based on technical merit rather than short-term financial metrics. The room was absolutely silent, everyone focused intently. We've made significant strides, but our journey is just beginning. Victor's approach wasn't just about poor business decisions. It represented a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes Meridian valuable. He saw a financial asset to be optimized for quick returns. We know better. We understand that our true value lies in creating systems that healthcare providers can rely on in critical moments. I paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had weathered this corporate storm alongside me. Last week, I received an email from Lakeside Memorial Hospital in Michigan. During a severe winter storm, they lost power for over 12 hours. Their backup generators maintained essential medical equipment, but most of their computer systems went down. Except ours. Our inventory management module continued running on emergency power, allowing them to track and distribute critical supplies throughout the crisis. The administrator wrote, "Your system didn't just function during an emergency, it helped us save lives." A ripple of pride visibly moved through the crowd. That's the standard we must hold ourselves to. Not quarterly financial metrics or superficial feature counts, but building technology robust enough to perform when everything else is failing. Technology that healthcare providers can stake patients' lives on. The applause that followed wasn't the polite acknowledgement typical of corporate meetings. It was genuine enthusiasm, the sound of a company reconnecting with its purpose. As we settled into the new normal, an unexpected complication arose. Despite being removed from his position, Victor remained active in the industry, speaking with our competitors and former clients. Through our network, we learned he was positioning himself as the victim of a hostile takeover, claiming the company would inevitably suffer under its outdated leadership. These rumors gained enough traction that the board suggested I address them directly. Reluctantly, I agreed to an interview with Healthcare Technology Review, a respected industry publication. The journalist, Alicia Winters, met me in our headquarters rather than conducting the interview remotely. She wanted to see the company environment firsthand. "I appreciate your willingness to speak with me," Alicia began after setting up her recording equipment in my office. "There are conflicting narratives about the recent leadership changes at Meridian. Victor Richardson has been quite vocal about his version of events." "I'm aware," I replied. "And while I typically prefer to let our work speak for itself, I understand the importance of clarity for our clients and partners." Victor claims the acquisition was engineered specifically to remove him after he attempted to modernize what he calls an outdated, inefficient operation. He suggests your resistance was about preserving the status quo rather than embracing necessary evolution. How do you respond? I considered my words carefully. Innovation has been Meridian's lifeblood since Greg Sullivan founded the company. We've consistently pioneered new approaches to healthcare logistics, often years ahead of our competitors. What Victor characterized as modernization was actually the opposite. Standardizing our operations to match conventional corporate practices without regard for the specialized needs of healthcare environments. "Can you provide specific examples?" Alicia asked. Certainly. Under Victor's direction, development cycles were extended from 2 weeks to 3 months to accommodate additional approval layers. Critical bug fixes that previously deployed within hours now languished for weeks awaiting executive sign-off. Research initiatives focused on hospital surge capacity during crises, a capability that proved essential during recent natural disasters, were defunded to redirect resources toward cosmetic interface changes. Alicia took notes, looking up occasionally to maintain eye contact. Victor specifically mentioned your resistance to his dashboard redesign as an example of being stuck in outdated thinking. The dashboard redesign itself wasn't the issue, I explained. It was prioritizing visual updates over critical functionality. Improvements. The redesign consumed resources needed to address system reliability issues that directly affected patient care. That's not resisting modernization. It's insisting that substance take precedence over appearance. What about his claims regarding financial management? He suggests the company was operating inefficiently before his arrival. Meridian has been consistently profitable since 2010, I replied. Our growth was deliberate and sustainable rather than artificially accelerated. Victor's efficiency improvements primarily involved reducing quality to cut costs, decisions that immediately improved short-term financial metrics but undermined long-term value. The proof was in the results. Client satisfaction declined by 38% during his tenure, and we lost more senior talent in 8 months than in the previous 5 years combined. The interview continued for over an hour, covering everything from our technical approach to our vision for the future. Throughout, I maintained professional respect while firmly addressing the misconceptions Victor had been spreading. When Alicia was preparing to leave, she paused. Off the record, I've interviewed dozens of tech executives over the years. The difference in this building compared to most is palpable. People actually make eye contact in the hallways. They smile. That's remarkably rare in corporate environments. We're rebuilding something precious that was nearly lost, I replied simply. The article, published the following week, was fair and comprehensive. It presented both perspectives, but included testimonials from clients and industry experts that largely supported our position. More importantly, it shifted the narrative from corporate drama to a substantive discussion about different approaches to healthcare technology development. Victor's public campaign against Meridian gradually lost momentum as our results spoke for themselves. 3 months after the leadership change, we released a major update to our inventory management system, the very one my team had originally proposed before being overruled. The response from clients was overwhelmingly positive, with several specifically noting how the improvements addressed long-standing pain points. Our financial performance reflected these successes. The initial dip caused by our client relationship remediation efforts was quickly offset by improved retention rates and new contracts. By the 6-month mark, we had not only stabilized, but were showing stronger growth than during Victor's tenure. Growth built on creating genuine value rather than financial engineering. Perhaps the most satisfying moment came during a healthcare technology conference in Chicago. I was scheduled to deliver a keynote address on innovation in medical logistics. As I reviewed my notes in the green room before going on stage, I glanced up to see Victor entering the speaker preparation area. He was listed as a panelist for a later session on corporate restructuring for maximum value. Our eyes met briefly across the room. For a moment, I thought he might approach, to argue, to justify, perhaps even to reconcile. Instead, he simply nodded stiffly before turning away. In that brief exchange, I saw something I hadn't expected: uncertainty. The absolute confidence that had characterized his demeanor at Meridian had diminished. Reality had challenged his narrative. I delivered my keynote to an engaged audience, focusing on how technology could better serve healthcare providers during critical situations, drawing on real examples from hospitals using our systems during emergencies. Afterward, several administrators approached to discuss how Meridian solutions could address their specific challenges. As I was leaving the venue, I overheard a fragment of Victor's panel discussion. An audience member had asked about his experience at Meridian. Sometimes, he was saying, market forces move in unexpected directions. What matters is adapting to changing circumstances. Even now, he couldn't acknowledge the fundamental flaw in his approach: the failure to recognize that Meridian's value wasn't just in its financial metrics, but in its deep understanding of healthcare needs and its commitment to addressing them effectively. Walking back to my hotel that evening, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The company I had helped build for 20 years had nearly been dismantled for short-term profit Through determination, strategic thinking, and the support of others who believed in our mission, we had reclaimed it. More importantly, we had recommitted to the principles that made Meridian valuable in the first place. Victor's dismissive laugh when he demoted me, "You think we still need someone like you in this company? That's adorable," had revealed his fundamental misunderstanding. He saw experience and domain expertise as dispensable, easily replaced by generic business processes. He failed to recognize that Meridian's success was built on precisely that deep knowledge of healthcare logistics that he dismissed so casually. In the end, his arrogance became his undoing. He never considered that the person he was pushing aside might have the capability and determination to challenge him. He never imagined that investors would value sustainable excellence over quick profits. He never understood what truly made Meridian worth fighting for. As I entered my hotel room, my phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Northwest Regional Healthcare, one of our largest clients, and one that had been on the verge of leaving during Victor's tenure. The subject line read simply, "Contract renewal and expansion." I opened it immediately. Not only were they renewing their existing services, but they were implementing our solutions across 5 additional facilities, a significant vote of confidence in Meridian's renewed direction. The email concluded, "The improvements over the past 6 months have been remarkable. It's clear that Meridian has returned to the patient-centered innovation that initially made us choose your systems. We look forward to continuing this partnership." I forwarded the email to our leadership team with a brief note. "This is why we fought so hard. This is what victory truly looks like." Later that evening, as I sat on the hotel balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, I found myself reflecting on a conversation with Greg from the early days of our reclamation effort. "The real measure of success," he had said, "won't be in defeating Victor or even in saving the company. It will be in proving that doing the right thing, building technology that genuinely serves healthcare needs, is also good business." 6 months in, the evidence was mounting that he was right. Our client satisfaction scores had rebounded significantly. Employee retention had stabilized, with several key team members who had left under Victor's leadership actually returning. Our financial metrics were strengthening not through cost-cutting or price increases, but through delivering genuine value that clients were willing to pay for. Victor had bet on financial engineering over authentic value creation, on generic business processes over specialized expertise, on short-term metrics over sustainable growth. He had lost that bet decisively. As the city lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk, I raised my glass in a silent toast, not to victory over an individual, but to the vindication of a principle. That understanding and serving real human needs creates more lasting value than any financial sleight of hand. The company I had helped build for 20 years would continue its mission, stronger for having survived this challenge. And the person who had laughed at the idea that we needed someone like me, someone who understood healthcare logistics at a fundamental level, had inadvertently provided the opportunity to prove just how essential that understanding truly was. Sometimes, I reflected, justice arrives in unexpected ways. Not through confrontation or revenge, but through the simple, inevitable consequence of choices made. Victor chose extraction over creation, appearance over substance, short-term over sustainable. Those choices led naturally to his downfall when, confronted with an alternative vision backed by determination and strategic action. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Catherine, our legal advisor, calling with an unexpected update. "Rebecca, I thought you should know immediately. Meditech Enterprises just announced they're acquiring Ironscale Medical, Victor's new employer. The press release specifically mentions streamlining overlapping executive functions." Meaning, Victor is likely to be let go, I surmised. Precisely. Apparently, his restructuring expertise wasn't as valuable as he thought. After ending the call, I returned to the balcony view. There was no satisfaction in knowing Victor would likely experience the very fate he had inflicted on others. Only the reinforcement of a lesson I had learned through this entire experience. Leadership built on extracting value rather than creating it eventually collapses under its own weight. The contrast couldn't be clearer. While Victor faced another career setback, Meridian was thriving, not despite recommitting to its foundational values, but because of it. We had proven that understanding healthcare needs at a deep level, valuing experienced team members, and prioritizing quality over short-term financial engineering wasn't just ethically sound. It was good business. Tomorrow, I would return to Portland, to the company reclaimed against overwhelming odds, to continue building something that mattered. Not just software, but systems that healthcare providers could rely on when lives were at stake. Systems built by people who understood the challenges at a fundamental level. People exactly like me. How adorable indeed. 1 year had passed since the day Victor attempted to remove me from the company I helped build. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office as I reviewed our annual performance report, each page confirming what we already knew. Meridian had not only recovered from Victor's tenure, but was thriving beyond our most optimistic projections. Client retention had reached 97%, the highest in company history. Employee satisfaction scores had doubled compared to the previous year. Most importantly, our healthcare logistics systems had maintained 99.98% uptime during critical operations, including during 3 major regional emergencies where hospitals relied on our technology to coordinate life-saving resources. A knock at my door pulled me from the report. "The documentary crew is ready whenever you are," said Melissa, my executive assistant. I nodded, taking a deep breath. A healthcare technology journal was producing a feature on companies that had successfully navigated major transitions. They had chosen Meridian as their central case study, interviewing staff, clients, and industry analysts about our remarkable turnaround. The conference room had been transformed into a temporary studio. Lights, cameras, and sound equipment framed. The far end where 2 chairs waited, one for me and one for the interviewer, Dr. Elaine Harper, a respected healthcare technology analyst. "Rebecca," Elaine greeted me warmly as I entered. "Thank you for making time for this. Your company's journey this past year has been nothing short of extraordinary." Once the cameras were rolling, Elaine began with the question everyone still found most fascinating. Let's start with the moment that captured headlines across the industry. You were demoted by CEO Victor Richardson, then revealed days later that you had secretly acquired the company. Take us through that experience. I smiled. The headlines made it sound more dramatic than it felt from the inside. Yes, I was called into Victor's office and informed that after 20 years of building Meridian's product division, I was being relegated to an advisory role with no real authority. When he laughed at the suggestion that the company still needed someone with my specialized healthcare experience, something crystallized for me. "What was that?" Elaine prompted. That Victor fundamentally misunderstood what made Meridian valuable. He saw us as just another tech company that could be optimized through standard corporate practices. What he failed to grasp was that our success came from deeply understanding the unique challenges of healthcare logistics, knowledge built over decades of close collaboration with hospitals and clinics. And that misunderstanding led to your decision to acquire the company. Actually, the acquisition plan was already in motion before that meeting, I clarified. Through industry contacts, I'd learned that Victor was preparing to sell Meridian to a conglomerate that would likely dismantle it for parts, absorbing our client list and patents while discarding the talent and expertise that made our systems effective. That prospect was what initially drove me to action. Elaine nodded. Many were surprised by how quickly you were able to assemble the resources needed for such an acquisition. That speaks to the relationships built over 20 years. When I reached out to former colleagues, early investors, and strategic partners, I found many shared my concern about Meridian's direction under Victor. They understood that the company's true value lay in its specialized knowledge and commitment to healthcare outcomes, not in financial engineering. Together, we formed Phoenix Medical Systems specifically to acquire Meridian and restore its original mission. The moment you revealed yourself as the new owner has become something of an industry legend, Elaine smiled. Care to share what that was like? I laughed softly. Surreal is the word that comes to mind. Walking into that boardroom and seeing Victor's expression shift from irritation to disbelief as he realized what had happened. It wasn't about personal vindication, though many assumed that was my primary motivation. It was about preserving something valuable that was at risk of being destroyed. The interview continued as we discussed the steps taken to rebuild after Victor's departure, restoring research initiatives, simplifying approval processes, reestablishing client trust, and realigning the company with its founding principles. Some critics suggested your approach was rejecting necessary modernization, Elaine noted. How do you respond to that? That fundamentally mischaracterizes what happened, I replied. Innovation has always been Meridian's cornerstone. What we rejected wasn't modernization, but standardization. The notion that healthcare technology should be developed using the same processes as consumer apps or social media platforms. Healthcare has unique requirements: reliability under crisis conditions, seamless integration with clinical workflows, and absolute precision when lives depend on your systems functioning correctly. And the results speak for themselves, Elaine acknowledged. Your client satisfaction metrics have reached record levels, and several hospital systems that were considering leaving have not only stayed but expanded their implementations. That's what matters most, I agreed. Not proving anyone wrong, but proving that doing right by healthcare providers creates sustainable value. After the formal interview concluded and the crew began packing up their equipment, Elaine stayed behind. Off the record, she said once we were alone, I've covered this industry for 15 years, and what you've accomplished here is remarkable. Not just the dramatic acquisition, but the recovery afterward. Most companies that undergo such turbulent leadership changes never fully regain their footing. We had an advantage, I replied. The foundation was solid. Victor's tenure was relatively brief, so the damage, while significant, hadn't become irreversible. And most importantly, we had people who remembered what Meridian stood for and were eager to return to those principles. Have you heard what happened with Victor? She asked. I nodded. I try not to focus on it, but news travels in this industry. After Meditech's acquisition of Ironscale eliminated his position, he launched a management consulting firm specializing in strategic corporate restructuring. I understand they've struggled to gain traction. The market has a way of delivering lessons, Elaine observed. Indeed it does. After Elaine left, I walked through the engineering department on my way back to my office. The energy was palpable. Developers clustered around whiteboards discussing implementation details, UX designers reviewing feedback from hospital staff, quality assurance teams meticulously testing edge cases that might arise during emergency situations. Nathan, once my replacement, now heading our mobile user experience team in a role actually suited to his talents, waved me over to his workstation. We've got something I think you'll want to see, he said, gesturing to his screen where a prototype interface was displayed. The trauma team at Metropolitan General suggested a way to streamline supply requests during multi-casualty incidents. We've been working on implementing it. I leaned in, immediately grasping the elegance of the solution. This could save critical minutes when time matters most. How soon can we roll it out for testing? 2 weeks for the beta version, Nathan replied confidently. We're fast-tracking it because 3 hospitals specifically requested this functionality after the highway pileup last month strained their existing processes. This was Meridian at its best, listening closely to healthcare providers' challenges and responding with solutions that addressed real needs rather than chasing flashy features that looked good in sales presentations but added little practical value. Later that afternoon, I met with our CFO, Diana Matthews. Unlike Victor's financially focused executives who viewed every decision through the lens of quarterly metrics, Diana understood that Meridian's financial health stemmed from creating genuine value for our clients. "The Q3 projections are even stronger than we anticipated," she reported, sliding a folder across my desk. "The contract renewals are coming in at a 97% rate, and most include expansions to additional facilities or modules." "Any concerns on the horizon?" I asked, always preferring to address potential issues early rather than being blindsided. "Just one," Diana said. "We're approaching capacity constraints in the implementation team. With so many new contracts and expansions, they're stretched thin. We either need to pace our growth or expand that department significantly." "Let's expand," I decided after brief consideration. "We've spent a year rebuilding trust and momentum. I don't want to start turning away business just as healthcare systems are recognizing the value we provide. Work with HR to develop a hiring and training plan, prioritizing quality over quick scaling." Diana nodded approvingly. "Exactly what I hoped you'd say. I've already drafted some preliminary numbers for a sustainable expansion." She handed me another document with projected costs and timelines. This exchange exemplified the difference between our approach and Victor's. Where he would have demanded implementation with fewer resources to maximize short-term profit margins, we recognized that compromising quality for speed would ultimately undermine our reputation and client relationships, the true foundation of our value. As evening approached, I prepared for a dinner that held special significance. Greg Sullivan, Meridian's founder and my longtime mentor, was visiting Portland for the first time since his health had improved. We had arranged to meet at Riverside, a quiet restaurant overlooking the Willamette River that had been one of his favorites during his years leading the company. Greg arrived looking better than I'd seen him in years. The stress that had accelerated his retirement clearly lifted from his shoulders. His eyes sparkled with their old energy as he embraced me warmly. "Rebecca," he said as we sat at a table by the window, "looking at you now, confident, assured, leading the company we built with such clear vision, it makes everything worthwhile. I couldn't have done it without your support," I reminded him. "When we approached you about the Phoenix acquisition, you could have dismissed it as an impractical revenge fantasy." Greg laughed. "I knew better. From the day you joined Meridian, this brilliant young programmer with a background in healthcare administration, who actually understood both the technical and practical sides of our challenges, I recognized someone special. Your solution for inventory tracking during emergency situations was more sophisticated than anything our senior developers had proposed, and you'd been with us less than 3 months." I smiled at the memory. "That feels like a lifetime ago." "In many ways it was," Greg agreed. "The company has evolved tremendously since those early days in the converted dance studio. But the core principles remain unchanged. Understanding healthcare providers' real challenges and creating technology that genuinely addresses them, not just technology for technology's sake." As our meals arrived, Greg raised his glass. "To Meridian, not just surviving, but thriving as it was meant to." We clinked glasses, and I felt a wave of gratitude for this man who had created the foundation upon which I had built my career, and now, my leadership legacy. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," I said after we had eaten. "When Victor was dismantling everything we'd built, before Phoenix was even conceived, you told me to document everything. You seemed to anticipate that documentation would be valuable someday. Did you somehow foresee what might happen?" Greg's eyes twinkled. "Not specifically, no. But I've been in business long enough to recognize certain patterns. When someone focuses exclusively on short-term financial metrics at the expense of what makes a company truly valuable, it rarely ends well. The documentation was insurance, evidence of the consequences of those decisions, should it ever be, needed. It proved invaluable," I acknowledged. both in convincing investors to join Phoenix and later in rebuilding client trust by demonstrating our understanding of what had gone wrong. Greg nodded thoughtfully. You know, watching from the sidelines this past year has reaffirmed something I've always believed but rarely seen proven so dramatically. Leadership that understands the fundamental purpose of an enterprise will ultimately outperform leadership focused solely on financial extraction. Victor never grasped that, I observed. He saw Meridian as a financial asset to be optimized rather than a mission to be fulfilled. And that was his fatal flaw, Greg agreed. He dismissed specialized knowledge as dispensable, failing to recognize that it was precisely that depth of understanding that created Meridian's value in the first place. As our dinner concluded and we walked along the riverside path afterward, Greg placed a hand on my shoulder. I founded Meridian, but you saved it, Rebecca. More than that, you've elevated it beyond what I had envisioned. The systems you've developed in the past year, especially the crisis response modules, are genuinely changing outcomes for patients. His words warmed me more than any financial success could have. That's all I ever wanted, to create technology. That makes a meaningful difference in healthcare delivery. And that, Greg said simply, is why you succeeded where Victor failed. He wanted to extract value. You want to create it. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The interview with Elaine and dinner with Greg had stirred reflections on our journey, from the brink of being dismantled to our current renaissance. As I made coffee in the small kitchen adjacent to my office, I noticed a young software developer named Zoe working intently at her desk despite the early hour. You're here before even the sunrise crowd, I observed, pausing by her workstation. She looked up, momentarily startled. Oh, good morning, Ms. Chen. I'm finalizing the disaster recovery module for tomorrow's release. There was an edge case I wanted to resolve before it went live. I recognized the dedication that had once driven me to similar early mornings and late nights. Anything I can help with? Actually, she hesitated, then seemed to gather courage. I've been thinking about how the system handles resource allocation during cascading failures, like when a natural disaster affects multiple facilities simultaneously. Our current algorithm optimizes for each facility individually, but I've been working on an approach that could coordinate across the network more effectively. Show me, I said, pulling up a chair. For the next 30 minutes, Zoe walked me through her concept, a sophisticated approach to multi-facility resource coordination that showed remarkable insight into both the technical challenges and the practical realities of healthcare during crises. This is excellent work, I told her when she finished. Have you shared it with your team lead? Not yet, she admitted. It's still conceptual, and it goes beyond our current project scope. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate to raise something this ambitious. I smiled, recognizing a familiar mindset. Zoe, some of Meridian's most important innovations have come from people like you seeing beyond immediate requirements to what could be possible. Draft a proper proposal and send it directly to me. If it's as promising as it appears, we'll create space for you to develop it properly. The gratitude in her eyes reminded me why I had fought so hard for Meridian, not just to preserve what we had built, but to create an environment where the next generation of innovators could flourish, where ambitious ideas were welcomed rather than constrained by short-term thinking, where understanding healthcare's unique challenges was valued above generic business processes. Later that day, I had a scheduled video call with Dr. James Werner, Chief Medical Officer at Northwest Regional Healthcare System, one of our most important clients, and among the first to expand their implementation after our leadership change. I wanted to personally thank you for the rapid response to last week's server issue, he began once our connection stabilized. Your team had the system back online in under 20 minutes, and the automated failover prevented any disruption to patient care. That kind of reliability is exactly why we've continued to deepen our relationship with Meridian. I appreciate that, Dr. Werner. We've made system resilience our top priority. It shows, he affirmed. But I didn't schedule this call just to offer praise. I wanted to discuss something exciting. Our trauma department has been collaborating with 3 other regional hospitals on standardized protocols for mass casualty incidents. We believe integrating these protocols directly into your logistics system could significantly improve coordination during regional emergencies. This was precisely the kind of partnership that had always driven Meridian's most valuable innovations, healthcare professionals bringing real-world challenges directly to our development team. That sounds exactly like the kind of project where Meridian can add substantial value, I replied. I'd like to assign a dedicated team to work directly with your trauma specialists. Excellent, Dr. Werner smiled. This kind of collaborative approach is what sets Meridian apart from your competitors. We approached another vendor with a similar proposal last year and were told it didn't align with their product roadmap. They wanted to sell us their standard solution rather than adapting to our actual needs. I nodded, recognizing the approach he described. That's never been our philosophy. We believe the best healthcare technology emerges from deep collaboration with the professionals who will actually use it. After the call concluded, I reviewed my calendar for the remainder of the day. The final appointment was particularly meaningful, a coffee meeting with Diane from HR, who had been present in Victor's office the day he demoted me. She had reached out, requesting time to discuss something personal. We met at the small cafe, in the lobby of our building. Diane arrived looking hesitant, her usual professional composure slightly diminished. "Thank you for making time," she began. "I've wanted to have this conversation for months but never found the right moment." "What's on your mind?" I asked gently. "I need to apologize," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "For my role in your demotion last year." I sat there silently, while Victor dismissed 20 years of your contributions. I handed you that severance folder without a word of protest. I hadn't expected this. Diane, you were doing your job. You weren't in a position to challenge Victor's decisions. Perhaps not openly, she acknowledged. But I could have found ways to warn you about what was coming. I could have pushed back in private meetings. Instead, I rationalized my compliance as professional neutrality when it was really just fear. Fear of losing my position if I demonstrated anything less than complete loyalty to Victor's vision. Her candor moved me. We all made compromises during that period. Some stayed silent to protect their livelihoods. Others left rather than participate in dismantling what we'd built. A few actively enabled Victor's worst impulses. Your presence in that meeting was the least of the injuries I experienced. Still, she persisted, watching how you've led the company this past year, with transparency, compassion, and unwavering commitment to our mission, has made me reflect deeply on my own actions. The contrast between your leadership and what preceded it couldn't be starker. The important thing is what we do moving forward, I replied. Your work rebuilding our human resources department has been exemplary. The new professional development programs, the improved work-life balance policies, these have been crucial to restoring Meridian's culture. Diane relaxed slightly, a small smile forming. Thank you for that. I suppose we've all been given second chances to realign with our better values. Exactly, I agreed. And that's ultimately what this past year has been about. Not just recovering from Victor's tenure, but becoming something stronger and more purposeful than we were before. As evening settled over Portland, I found myself alone in my office, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The dramatic boardroom confrontation that had made headlines was just the beginning. The real work had been the patient, methodical rebuilding of what Victor had nearly destroyed. Trust with clients, faith among employees, commitment to our founding principles. I walked to the window, watching the city lights emerge as dusk deepened. In the reflection, I could see the wall behind me, the restored timeline of Meridian's history that Victor had removed, now expanded to include the most recent chapter. our reclamation and renewal. The phone on my desk rang softly. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Rebecca Chen, I answered. Ms. Chen, this is Thomas Whitfield, CEO of HealthCore Systems. I recognized the name immediately. HealthCore was one of the largest healthcare technology conglomerates in the country, and a company that had approached us about a potential acquisition shortly after our leadership change. We had declined their initial overture, preferring to rebuild independently. Mr. Whitfield, what can I do for you? I'll be direct, he said. HealthCore is interested in renewing acquisition discussions with Meridian. After observing your turnaround this past year, we're prepared to offer a substantial premium over market value. Your innovations in crisis response technology specifically would integrate perfectly with our portfolio. A year ago, such an offer might have been tempting. Validation that we had successfully restored Meridian's value after Victor's harmful tenure. Now, it prompted a different response. I appreciate your interest, Mr. Whitfield, but Meridian isn't for sale. We've recommitted to our independent path focused on creating healthcare logistics solutions that genuinely serve providers' needs. That mission is best fulfilled as a standalone company. I understand your position, he replied smoothly, but I encourage you to consider the resources HealthCore could provide. Expanded market access, research funding, technical infrastructure. We would preserve Meridian's brand and operational independence while adding our considerable resources. Those are compelling arguments, I acknowledged, and perhaps at some future point, they might align with our vision. For now, however, we're focused on building something specific, a company where innovation is driven by deep understanding of healthcare challenges, rather than market positioning or financial engineering. After ending the call, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. Once, I had been the one desperately assembling resources to save Meridian from being sold and dismantled. Now, I was declining acquisition offers from industry leaders who recognized the value we had rebuilt. Value that extended far beyond financial metrics to encompass the trust of healthcare providers who relied on our systems daily. The full circle moment wasn't lost on me. Victor had laughed when I suggested the company still needed people who truly understood healthcare logistics. That's adorable, he had dismissed. Now, that very expertise, the specialized knowledge, he had considered dispensable, had restored Meridian to its position as an industry leader and made it attractive enough for HealthCore to pursue. The ultimate vindication wasn't in Victor's downfall or even in my ascension to CEO. It was in the daily evidence that our approach, prioritizing genuine understanding of healthcare needs over generic business processes, created more sustainable value than Victor's extractive methods ever could. As I gathered my things to leave for the evening, my phone chimed with a text from Greg. Saw the announcement about the new crisis coordination system. Brilliant work. This is exactly what Meridian was always meant to be. I smiled, typing back, just building on the foundation you created. The best is still ahead. And that was the truth. The dramatic confrontation with Victor had been just the beginning of our story, not its conclusion. The real triumph was in what we were creating now, technology that helped healthcare providers save lives during their most challenging moments, developed by people who understood those challenges at a fundamental level. People exactly like me. How adorable indeed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.